HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Few Minutes Past Midnight by Stuart M. Kaminsky, read by Jim Meskimen.
Prologue. I sat with my back against the cool headstone over the grave of one Samuel Sidney Talavest. It was dark, it was cold, and somewhere in the night a man with my gun and a flashlight was looking for me. His plan was simple: to kill me and get what I had in my pocket. My plan was simple: to stay alive. One of us was not going to be happy. I could make out headstones and a few trees. Maybe a few feet behind the headstone my back was against, he stood waiting, listening. Something slithered through the nearby grass. I held my breath. Then, footsteps. At least I thought I heard footsteps. They were behind me. I couldn't tell how far. Suddenly I saw the beam of his flashlight to my left. It swept from left to right and then moved forward. He was systematically going down each row, looking behind each stone. The cemetery wasn't small, but it wasn't as big as I would have liked, and the stone wall around the place was about 10 feet high. On my best day, at the age of 18, I couldn't have made it up and over that wall. Pushing 50 with a sore ankle, my chances hadn't improved. I didn't see how things could get much worse. Then it started to rain. He didn't have all night to look. The police would be coming soon, but he was moving fast now, and the odds were good that he would get to me before the cavalry arrived. I had a little time to try to come up with something. I couldn't. I could have done a lot of things differently. I should have done a lot of things differently. You can make up your own mind about that. It had all started 4 days ago. Chapter 1. It was a few minutes past midnight, Charlie Chaplin had told me, sitting in an overstuffed chair in his living room. He was wearing dark slacks, a white knit sweater, and tennis shoes. He twirled a tennis racket in his hands as he spoke. His thick, mostly white head of curly hair needed a trim. Chaplin looked at the racket and then turned his tired blue eyes to me before continuing in precise, clearly spoken words, with just a hint of an English accent, as he paced the living room of his house in Bel Air. "I couldn't sleep," he continued. "I don't sleep at all well when I'm working on a new film, or considering one for that matter. I happened to be sitting on the stairs near the Chinese gong on the first landing. I heard a knock. Distinct. 5 times. Not loud. I wondered how my visitor had gotten past the gate. Given my recent problems, Mr. Peters, I've been rather more bothered by the press and the morbidly curious." "Call me Toby," I said. "I shall," said Chaplin, not telling me what to call him. Mr. Chaplin would be fine for now. He paused and looked at me, trying to decide if I was the right bill of goods. I had met him briefly once before while working on a case. I was surprised he had remembered my name and called me. Maybe I make a better impression than I think I do. Maybe. He was silent, studying me. I knew what he was looking at. Seated in the chair across from him was a rumpled private detective with a battered face and flattened nose, a 48-year-old wreck with dark hair beginning to show gray, a wreck with a bad back and some bills to pay. I'm a good listener. I know how to keep secrets. I'm not the brightest you can buy, but I come relatively cheap, and I don't give up on a client. I also know when to keep my mouth shut. "I opened the door," Chaplin went on, apparently satisfied with what he saw. "There he stood, a slight man about 40 years old, drenched, dark hair hanging over his eyes, and in his right hand he held a singularly sinister and quite long-bladed knife. Almost a sword, really. I should have been afraid, I suppose. The effect was worthy of theatrical appreciation, especially since there had been no rain. That was the perfect touch." Chaplin was still pacing. He took a half-hearted overhand stroke with his racket. Fanny Bryce or Baby Sandy could have returned it for a kill. "I should have been afraid," said Chaplin, continuing to pace. "Perhaps at some level I was, but I was transfixed. It was as if I had been expecting him, or someone like him." "You have enemies," I prompted when Chaplin paused. "Enemies," he said with a sigh. "You read the newspapers?" The question was accompanied by an arch of his right eyebrow. I nodded. "To say that I have enemies would be an understatement," he sighed. "Were my enemies to form a military unit, they would be quite a formidable military presence, at least in numbers, if not in fighting ability." He stopped, tucked his racket under his arm, and began a countdown with his fingers. I fished the notebook out of my jacket, found my pencil that had already made its pointed way an inch into the lining, and began to take notes. I made a big 1 with a circle and a dash, and waited. "As you may know, I've just been married," he said. "My wife Una, the daughter of Eugene O'Neill," I supplied. Chaplin nodded. I knew his Mexican divorce from Paulette Goddard had gone through about a year ago. I knew a lot of things about Chaplin. "Una is 18, Chaplin said. "I have had, shall we say, semi-public relationships with a variety of young women." We shall say, I thought. Some of those women were as young as 16. "There are people who have been most vituperative about my marriages," he said, "and particularly hostile toward my current one. Fans of O'Neill, religious fanatics, moralists who know nothing of reality or our relationships have condemned me. I very much love my wife. I anticipate a large family and a reasonably happy future with Una, should I survive the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and the occasional soaking wet and knife-wielding lunatic at my front door." "You told her what happened?" He closed his eyes again for an instant, smiled, and shook his head no. "Fortunately, at the moment she is attending a family funeral in Connecticut," he said. "So," he said, "let us list some of those who might wish me harm. We begin with the fanatic fans of my father-in-law, who, between us and in the confines of this room, himself has had more than an occasional attraction to quite young women. I'm sorry," he bowed his head. "That was petty of me. Would you like some tea?" "No, thanks," I said. "And so," he continued, "one finger down for his lunatic fans." One finger went down for the fans of Eugene O'Neill, who were happy to be counted among those who might not be happy with Chaplin. "Next," he said, standing before me, "Joan Barry." I knew about Joan Barry, but I kept my mouth shut. He had become involved with her a few months after his divorce from Paulette Goddard became final. "Miss Barry was a protégée of mine," he said, "a star-struck girl from Brooklyn. I was introduced to her by way of a letter of introduction from John Paul Getty, who, as I understood it, knew her as a waitress. I tried to work with her, but she simply did not have the talent." The way the newspapers told it, and they told it a lot, Barry, who was 22 or 23, had had 2 abortions while she was with Chaplin. He'd dumped her a little over a year ago. She was pregnant again. This time she took Chaplin to court. 2 months before this moment in Chaplin's living room, a jury had found against Chaplin, despite the fact that blood tests proved he wasn't the father. The Los Angeles Times and newspapers around the world carried photographs of a glum Chaplin being fingerprinted. "She came here to this house about 10 or 11 months ago with a gun she'd purchased in a pawn shop," Chaplin said. "I persuaded her to leave and filed an injunction against her and took her to court. She was given a train ticket out of town and $100. She returned 7 months ago, broke into this house, and—" "And?" I prompted when he paused. "Let's move on," he said. "As a matter of deep conviction, last year I addressed a meeting in Madison Square Garden in New York, calling for a second front in Europe to aid the Russians. I demanded that England and the United States attack from the west while Russia fought desperately, her back against the wall. Many people thought it was not my place to make such a plea. I then spoke at Carnegie Hall, saying, more or less as I recall, 'Now is the best time for a second front while the Hun is so busy in Russia.' And then, at an Arts in Russia Week dinner at the Hotel Pennsylvania, I urged elimination of anti-communist propaganda in the interest of winning the war. Since our allies do not object to our own ideas and form of government, I do not think it proper to object to theirs. While the attack on me came as no surprise, the level was overwhelming." A second finger went down. "That is for the fanatical anti-communists who do not even recognize their own self-interest, let alone the humanity of others. If Germany takes Russia, the Nazis will gain access to a new oil supply. This could result in extending the war for years. "I'll try to be brief with the remaining 7, he said. "I've never become a citizen of the United States. I do not even consider myself English. I am, as I have said publicly and often, a citizen of the world. There are those who claim that while America has made me wealthy, I have no reservations about criticizing this country's policies, even though I am not a citizen. Thus, I am that most dreaded of wartime creatures, a peacemonger. That is, I criticize all policies that do not lead to peace." "Even Stalin's?" I wanted to ask. His eyes were fixed on me as the 3rd finger went down. "Even those of Russia when appropriate," he said, reading my face. "I am not a communist with a small or large C. I belong to no party. I understand I shall be called before the House Un-American Activities Committee because of my views. It was my impression that a person was free to say what he or she thought in the United States, as long as he did not cry fire in a crowded theater. But times change. In war, rights and principles are often forgotten, or their existence suspended in the name of defense. It seems to me that we are most in need of those rights precisely when they are being most threatened. I was under the impression that it was those rights for which the United States and its allies were fighting. But I'm lecturing. Please forgive me. Shall we continue?" I nodded. "I was a supporter of Henry Wallace, an outspoken supporter. Enough said?" I nodded again. A 4th finger went down. Wallace was not on the list of most beloved people in the United States. "I have repeatedly declared that I am not a Jew," he went on. "Being Jewish is a matter of religion and conviction, and to some degree heritage. My Jewish heritage is tenuous at best. I could simply be quiet. I choose not to be. There are people, not only Jewish people, who do not like my speaking out on such a delicate subject." A 5th finger went down, and he looked into my eyes. I looked back. "I was born Tobias Leo Pevsner, Jewish. I changed my name before I became a cop. My brother Phil, still a cop, is still a Pevsner. I didn't hide the fact that I was born Jewish, I just didn't advertise it. I didn't practice the religion, and I didn't feel any connection to the tradition. I bought into the melting pot when I was a kid. It was a point of friction, one among many, between my brother and me." "On to 6, Chaplin said, looking from his now clenched right fist to his left. "A man named Konrad Berkovici sued me recently, claiming that I had stolen the idea for The Great Dictator from him, that he had submitted a proposal for a similar idea to me, and that I had returned it and then had made the film. I denied it on the stand, but my lawyers advised me to settle out of court. I did so with great reluctance. Expedience is sometimes essential in this one and only world." "You think Berkovici—" "No, I do not," said Chaplin. "He seemed quite content with the settlement, as well he should have been. But there may have been those who knew him, or of him, who— Madness is often difficult to find by applying non-mad methods of thinking." Finger 6 came down. Chaplin examined the 4 remaining fingers. His hands were small, delicate, and very clean. "Since the outbreak of war," he said, "I have had hundreds of threats relayed by mail and phone, on the streets and in the newspapers and on the radio. Mr. Westbrook Pegler seems particularly and morbidly interested in securing my deportation." "You think Westbrook Pegler—" "No," said Chaplin. "I think it possible that someone who reads Westbrook Pegler might not have the columnist's journalistic restraint." Finger 7 folded. The words journalistic restraint were emphasized for the sake of irony. "My career has been threatened," he said. "My convictions are unaltered. It is likely that if my career in this country is to continue, I will have to fund my own projects. I have the funds, though my resources have been strained. Before the war, I could count on my production costs being covered by Japanese sales alone. Now, with much of the world market closed, to increase my working capital, I have considered accepting the lead in The Flying Yorkshireman, which Frank Capra has offered to me, though I don't think I can work with any director but myself. I'm also trying to put together capitalization for a film version of Shadow and Substance, but I doubt if that will come about. There are people in the industry who want me to fail." "Enough to kill you?" "Enough to try to frighten me into oblivion or exile," Chaplin said, putting down finger 8. "The man with the blade at my door put on an arresting performance. Many of my Hollywood friends, including Harry Crocker and King Vidor, have abandoned me, he said with a deep sigh. Regrettable. Inevitable, as I can see now. But I can live with that. No, number 9 comes from some statements I have made over the years concerning the use of the Negro as a source of easy humor in movies. I never laugh at such humor. They have suffered too much to ever be funny to me. Several times early in my career, and much to my regret, there were background players in blackface, particularly in several of the films I did at SNA. And so there are people, bigots, who would gladly lynch me for my views on race. But then again, those of the KKK ilk have a very long list. The 9th finger came down. There was only one left, the pinky on Chaplin's left hand. I am working now on a film which I plan to call Lady Killer, he said. It was suggested to me by Orson Welles. The tramp will be gone. I will speak. The film will deal with the plight of a working man who turns to murder to feed his family. He marries women and murders them for their money. A Landru or Bluebeard tale. A comedy, I said. Of course, he said, closing his eyes and bowing. Which brings us back to the curious visitation I had last night. The wet man with the knife said that I should cease working on the film. He said that if I continued to develop it, he would return and kill me. His precise and colorful words were, as I recall, "I will skewer you." And then he said something quite curious. What? That I should stay away from Fiona Sullivan, said Chaplin, putting down his pinky. The game over. Who is Fiona Sullivan? I asked. He shook his head and said, I haven't the faintest idea. Fiona Sullivan, I repeated. He pronounced the name quite distinctly, said Chaplin. Repeated it, in fact. Long list of possible suspects, I said. Had I more fingers, Chaplin said with a smile. I did know a stuntman named Webster Skeechman, who had 6 fingers on one hand, and Harold Lloyd, as the result of an accident while filming, has fewer than 10. I can't remember exactly how many. But then Harold seems to have no enemies. And you called the police? Moments after the apparition disappeared, said Chaplin, unclenching his fists and playing with his racket again. They seemed monumentally disinterested, and the shabbily dressed detective who came to the door indicated that he considered the possibility that I was lying the most likely of options open to him. His imagination seemed remarkably limited. I had the impression that he considered the possibilities that I had been drinking or was using drugs, or that I was in search of sympathetic publicity. He was the same officer who had come when Miss Berry entered my house unbidden on those 2 separate occasions. Anything else? I asked. Chaplin considered and shook his head. I will think about it, he said. Do you have enough to begin your search for this man? I think so, I said, rising. There are a few other possibilities. He could be an actor trying to impress you, or just a nut who doesn't like your movies. Possibilities, Chaplin agreed. I'll keep the options open, I said, standing. One last thing. Remuneration, Chaplin said. Right. Your fee? 25 a day, expenses, and, in this case, another 20 a day for someone to watch you and your wife if she gets back before I find this guy. Yes, I see. I would prefer if that aspect of this business be done with discretion. It will be, I said, as Chaplin extended his hand. I assume you would like an advance, he said. Yes, I said. An advance would be nice. Then I could eat, get gas for my Crossley, pick up a new windbreaker, and pay my landlady. An advance would be very nice. Will cash do? Chaplin said, shifting his racket and reaching into his back pocket for his wallet. It will. He counted off $200 in 20s and handed them to me. I pocketed them without a second count. I'll get back to you every day. My man, the one who'll be watching you, will introduce himself, stay out of your way, and keep his eyes open. That will be satisfactory. And now, Mr. Peters, I still have a friend or two and a brave face to show the world, and I have a tennis engagement. I started across the room toward the front door. While I was counting, he said behind me softly, I was reminded of the Zeppelin sequence in Hell's Angels. You know it? Great movie, I said, turning back to him. Gripping sequence, Chaplin said. First the Germans, hurrying to get away from the British planes, cut the line of the man in the observation car. Then, to lighten his load further in an attempt to outrun the British, the Germans unload most of their equipment. When that isn't enough, the enlisted men are ordered to jump out of the vessel to their death. Watching them step into the dark hole is unforgettable. And then one of the British flyers sacrifices himself by diving into the Zeppelin. I identify with every one of those victims of war. I am haunted by that sequence. The brave and the innocent are the true victims of war. Pilots died making their movie, I said. I know, he said. Making movies can be almost as dangerous as war. He was lost in thought now. He gave me a private telephone number where I could reach him or leave a message. I wrote it in my book. I heard someone coming down the stairs when I went out the front door and crossed the driveway to my car. I had $200 to work with and too many leads. I'd need some help. I knew where to get it. I hit the radio button. The Crossley backfired. It had been doing a lot of things it shouldn't have been doing for a few months now, and it hated to come to life in the morning. It reminded me of me. I'd have to take it to No-Neck Arnie, the mechanic. On the way back to my office, going down Hollywood Boulevard, I listened to the end of Big Sister and caught the news. It was December 10th, 1943. The announcer with the deep voice said that the war news was good. The 9-day Battle of the Clouds over Germany marked a major victory for United States and Canadian pilots. The Fifth Army was moving on via Cassellini. Bulgaria was getting ready to bail out the Nazis. In the Pacific, Allied forces led by the Australians were clearing the Huon Peninsula. MacArthur was 70 miles away from the Vitiaz Straits, ready to come in and land. Meanwhile, U.S. planes had dropped 1,300 tons of bombs on New Britain in 2 weeks. I caught the first 2 minutes of Ma Perkins as I pulled into No-Neck Arnie's, 2 blocks from the Faraday Building where I had my office. Chapter 2. No-Neck Arnie, the mechanic, was wiping his hands on a greasy rag when I drove into his garage. 4 other cars were there with their hoods open like baby birds waiting for a worm, a bug, or a spark plug. A radio in the background was playing the Harry James version of Don't Get Around Much Anymore. Arnie wore his gray, dirty mechanic's uniform and a look on his face that, as he watched me, said clearly, "You think you've got problems." Arnie was around 60, solid with a little belly, blue eyes, and short steel-gray hair. He had no neck, or almost none. It would take a trained medical professional to find one if it existed. Before I got out of the Crossley, Arnie said, "Valves." Arnie always said, "valves." He seemed to believe faulty, leaky, malicious valves were responsible for all of man's automotive problems. I think if I'd asked him what Hitler's problem was, Arnie would have said, "Valves." He might have been right. I climbed out and stood next to Arnie as he continued to wipe his hands and look at the car he had sold me about a year earlier, telling me it was a reliable machine that he could keep running. "It runs on washing machine and refrigerator parts," he had said. "Does it make ice and clean underwear?" I had asked. Arnie had grunted and told me the price of the car. Now he stood before it, walked around it, shook his head. "Looks bad," he said. "Don't you want to know what the problem is?" I asked. Harry James hit a high note on his trumpet. Arnie paused to listen, and then said, "Valves." I get backfire. The car stalls. I think it's sick. "Leave it," he said, reaching out for the keys. I took the car key from the ring and dropped it in his hand. "Give me an hour. Make that 2. Scoville is ahead of you. He's got a big problem." "Valves?" I guessed. "No, gallbladder." "Nice guy." Harry James held the last note for about 8 seconds, and I walked out into the morning. The walk to the Faraday Building took about 10 minutes. It was late in the morning as I passed Manny's Taco Palace and looked inside for a familiar face. Manny was the only one I recognized. He looked up from his newspaper behind the counter and nodded. I nodded back and considered a morning taco. I decided to do some work first before rewarding myself with indigestion. The Faraday Building is on Hoover near 9th. I don't know who Faraday was. but the building bearing his name deserved to be condemned in 1930, or restored as an historic relic. The owner of the building, Jeremy Butler, poet, ex-wrestler, and friend, lived in the Faraday with his wife Alice and their baby Natasha. Jeremy fought the daily attack on his property with elbow grease, Lysol, and determination. The Faraday is a refuge for alcoholic doctors, broken-down baby photographers, has-been and never-was movie agents and producers, a fortune-teller named Juanita, a music teacher, and one third-rate dentist named Sheldon Mink, whose chamber of horrors was on the 6th floor. I sublet a near closet-sized cubbyhole off of Shelley's chamber. My footsteps echoed on the fake marble in the dark lobby of the Faraday. There were voices, off-key music, and sounds of machines and typewriters joining the odd beat of my feet. The lobby was wide and 6 stories high. At each level, a black-painted iron railing stood a dozen feet from the office doors. An ancient elevator of the same black-painted iron creaked when I stepped in and whirred slowly upward as I looked down into the lobby. There Jeremy Butler stepped out of the shadows, holding a mop, a bucket, and a bottle of Lysol. "Toby," he called, growing smaller, which was no mean trick considering Jeremy's bulk. His bald head caught a beam of light from some unseen source. "Thomas Wright Waller died." "Come again?" I said through the bars as the elevator inched forward. "Fats Waller," Jeremy said sadly. "How?" I said, hearing the word echo. "I don't know," he said. "Died on an eastbound train in Santa Fe. I think he'd left from there. It was probably his heart. According to the radio, he weighed 278 pounds, but I've seen him. He was bigger, much bigger." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm writing a poem to his memory," Jeremy said. It was hard to hear him now. I was 3 floors up, and a musical instrument that might have been a trombone hit an ugly note in a nearby office. "It's all I can do." "Can you stop by?" I called. "What?" "Come by my office," I shouted as the elevator vibrated past the 4th floor. He nodded. "How are you?" I called, aware of the sorrow in his voice. "Ain't misbehaving," he said. Or at least that's what I thought he said. Jeremy's grammar was always perfect, except when he took poetic license. I finally hit the 6th floor. The door opened, and there stood Juanita the fortune-teller. Juanita's real name wasn't Juanita. She came from a good New York Jewish family. She had married a wholesale tie salesman when she was young. He died, and she married a mildly successful shirt manufacturer and raised a family. Then husband number 2 died. Till she was a widow for the 2nd time, Juanita had hidden the fact that she had what she called the visions. She could tell things about people from touching them or just thinking about them. Sometimes the visions just came unbidden. Her kids were grown. Her last husband was dead, and Juanita had been reborn, so to speak. She had an office in the Faraday and a reasonably healthy business. Most of her clients were Mexicans, with a scattering of Greeks and a dash of Dutch, and refugees from the Balkans. I was convinced Juanita had a real gift, but it carried with it a curse I had experienced on more than one occasion. Whenever Juanita predicted my future, it turned out to be right, but her predictions couldn't be figured out till after the future had come and gone. Jeremy found this particularly interesting. I didn't. Jeremy and Juanita's clients had a better tolerance for her obscure gifts than I did. Usually I tried to avoid Juanita. This time, I couldn't. She helped me open the elevator door, her beads jangling, her dark, long dress dangling. She played the role. "I had the vision about Harold Stassen," she said. Stassen, the governor of Minnesota, was a serious contender for the next Republican nomination for president. "Saw him, clear as I see you now," she said, "in the living room of that mobile home he lives in. His wife was there, one of his kids. He was reading a newspaper. You know what the headline said?" "No," I answered. "Stassen will never be president," she said. "You planning to relay this information to him?" "Not my business. I'm going down for something to eat," she said. "You want me to bring you something?" I held the door open for her. "A couple of tacos from Manny's," I said, reaching into my pocket for my wallet. "On me," she said. "I'm feeling generous. I just got a big tip from Al Kazinza's." "Fish market, Al?" That's the one, she said with a smile. I told him he was going to die.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?